Happy Monday, September the 14th. September 14th, I have to look at my calendar to know what day, month, and year it is. It's like that in-between season right now where it's still technically summer until, the 22nd, September 22nd. But at least where I live, it gets a little bit colder suddenly. It went from like 85 to 64, and muggy and cloudy and rainy. And you don't know any point when you go outside what you should wear. It should be like a long sleeve tee with shorts, or a short sleeve shirt with pants, or like a light jacket and shorts, or a hoodie and shorts. You just super confused because it's like 63 and then 55 and cloudy and partly sunny, and it's just very confusing time, which is September 14th. I don't even know what season you call it. It's definitely not summer. It's crap. But anyway, before we get to the rest of the program, I want to talk to you about Il Taco Foods, which you can have their world-famous pizza puff in any season. Il Taco Foods has been feeding the hungry people of Chicago since 1927. Their most popular item, the pizza puff, became a Chicago staple as soon as it hit the very first hot dog stand here in the city. Seriously, I added the editorialize there with you can have it in any season, but you can have it in any season. I've had a pizza puff at least once a month this year in 2020. For those that don't know, a pizza puff is premium mozzarella, crumbled Italian sausage, and a signature home-style sauce wrapped in a pillowy yet crispy crust. If you've heard me talking about these on every episode and you haven't had one yet, that description should be enough to go out and try to find one. They're perfect. And that's just the original flavor too. We got pulled pork, buffalo chicken, gyro. It's like gyro basically in like a little pie. They have 14 different flavors in total. You can learn more about all those flavors and where to buy them from their website, www.iltaco.com. Through 4 generations of hard work and a passion for good food, their family-run business now distributes Chicago's Pizza Puff in 38 states across the U.S. Check out the website to find out where you can get the good stuff. Again, that's iltaco.com. I also want to talk to you today about Venmo. A little story. They're not a sponsor, but here's a little story about Venmo. Be careful what you joke about on Venmo, what you're putting out there when you're paying somebody back for something, and you put a little descriptor. No one ever puts the honest descriptor on Venmo to what they actually paid for. I mean, you always put like a joke thing down, and that's just what the app has been accustomed to. You put like you're paying somebody for dinner and you write Pornhub prescription or subscription or something. Last 2 Saturdays ago, I was paying my girlfriend back for a copious amount of Mediterranean food that we ordered. It's a DoorDash gift card, and we bought a ton of Mediterranean food. She ordered it on her phone, and I was paying her for it. And I'm on the Venmo, and I'm trying to think of something funny to write back on the Venmo, because that's like the whole part of it for me is like trying to find a funny descriptor. It's stupid because I put my Venmo private anyway, so like no one else can see but me and her. I'm trying to think of something, and we ordered a ton of hummus and pita chips, one of my favorite snacks. A ton of hummus. So I'm thinking, all right, I'm gonna write Hamas. I thought it was funny. I wrote Hamas, sent her the $30 or whatever it was, and then bam, denied. And Venmo said that they have to hold my account and review the transaction before letting it go through. 48 hours. They're going to be 48 hours to review it. And then they told me not to send any more money, to stop what I'm doing, go fuck myself. They're going to review this for 48 hours and then maybe approve it. Here you can see there's the Hamas. It was approved, and I added a comment saying, like, I'm sorry for the I called it a typo. The typo, we were paying for hummus. I didn't want to say it was like, I thought it was funny to say this is a terrorist organization. It wouldn't be funny to everyone, so I said it was a typo, which is clearly not a typo, and they let me back in. But be careful, because I was almost put on a terror watch list just because the lady and I went Dutch over some Mediterranean food. So be careful. Not a perfect segue, but this is not a terrible segue. Our guest today is maybe, probably, almost definitely the world's foremost expert on onion rings. I think it almost, you can say with certainty that our guest today, Tyler Groenendal, is the leading expert, at least in this country, who knows in the world, on all things onion rings. Tyler runs the blog solacapa.blogspot.com, where he reviews any and all onion rings that he stumbles into across the country. Tyler's based in Michigan, so it's a lot of Michigan onion rings, but he's reviewed fast food onion rings, chain restaurants, local places in different parts of the country, which he'll get into some of his favorites. His favorite of all time, which is in Austin, Texas. We talk about that. Onion rings wherever you can find them. Tyler has a very objective way of looking at it too, which is interesting. But it's not just like a niche. When we talk about this in the episode, having like a little niche creative outlet for something like this. It's not just that. He actually has a very thoughtful way that he started this blog and why he maintains this hobby of his. And it's really interesting. And I just like talking about food, so it was a lot of fun to do that. And I think you guys will find this interesting. If you're like me and if you're like Tyler and you love onion rings, then you definitely will. So here he is, Tyler Groenendal.
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Kaiser.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
I went out to eat for the sake of this next joke. Joke.
Order the double cheese and sausage.
Joe Kaiser, ladies and gentlemen.
Do you remember like when you actually had the idea pop in your head? Like what that day was like, what was going through your head?
I remember the day I started it. The idea popped in my head. It goes back a little further. I think it dates back to my freshman year of college. I went to this barbecue place in Jonesville, Michigan, which is right outside of Hillsdale, where I went to school. That for some reason I wanted to get onion rings. They weren't really things I ordered a lot in the past, but I heard they were good. I think I might have saw them going to another table or something, and I got them. And they kind of blew me away. And to this day, they're some of the best I've had in my entire life. But I started noticing a correlation because that kind of prompted me to eat onion rings at more places. And the more I did that, the more I noticed that onion ring quality correlated very strongly and positively with the quality of a restaurant. So the idea kind of started then. I sort of asked my roommates and other friends, like, would you read a blog about onion rings if I just reviewed that? And most of the time they answered no. They all read it now. But at the time they said no. So the idea was always batting around in my head. It's just like a thing to do. But I could probably find the exact day if I went back far enough. I know it was October 2016. I was in Atlanta, Georgia, because I was working for a conference that Hillsdale puts on called the Free Market Forum as a student. We were at the hotel. We had time to kill before we had to go back to the airport for our flight. So I got lunch there, and I just got onion rings. And I thought, well, let's figure this out. So it started then, October 2016. And I just kind of arbitrarily selected the categories and made a website and all that. But that's when it started.
Is there anything else that you think correlates to the quality of a restaurant? Or onion rings is a good example, and I can understand why you thought that. But like, are onion rings uniquely positioned for something like that, or are there other dishes, side dishes that have that same kind of correlation?
They're probably not necessarily unique. I think I look at the attributes of what an onion ring has, and that you can either get it frozen and mass produced, or you can make it by hand. You can put care into something, but you don't have to put care into it. So I think of it as something that's ordered frequently enough that is not something that you would put a distinction on. Like you would expect a steakhouse to have good steak. You expect a hamburger place to have good hamburgers. But things that you wouldn't expect to be the main focus or that you wouldn't expect to be good, and you still put the care into that. It's about what they represent more so than the rings themselves. I think there's other foods that could have that attribute. Could be frozen, could be good, etc. I don't know offhand what they might be. French fries are, I think, a little too simple. That's probably one thing in the past.
That's what popped in my head. It's like French fries would be an example of that, but they're too common. Like they're just the default side is French fries. You always have to upgrade to something else if you want onion rings or salad or something.
I guess it's part of it too. It can't be the default. It has to be something a little different. It can't be something that everyone gets. So I don't know. Good question, but I think there are other things that could fit the bill.
Yeah, well, I think it's just a good thing to point out because onion rings probably are the thing that they're not like French fries where you just throw them on a plate as the default side, but they are something that if you are putting effort into it, you're probably putting effort into other parts of the menu.
Mhm.
So I just think it's a good observation. So when you started doing this in 2016, like you said, you asked your friends if they'd read it and they said no, but apparently you went ahead with it anyway. What were the early days of the blog like?
I think it was exciting because I was still in college at the time. So my concentration of people was basically friends from college. And because I was there, I was always reviewing places that were local to the area. So the people like saw the connection to that and they knew me and they liked the like content attitude kind of thing. So I think that's how it kind of started. Probably to this day, most people who still read it are friends from college, or not most, a lot are. I remember my biggest piece ever in terms of the most views on the blog, which is not much, it's like 700, was that I went to the college dining hall and reviewed their onion rings. And I kind of eviscerated them, just like completely roasted them over the coals because it's like famously not good food, as I'm sure all college dining halls are. They're mostly
Right.
bad. And I had a little bugaboo about this because I hated the, there was a mandatory meal plan at Hillsdale. You had to pay $17 a meal at minimum, and you had to buy 100 meals. That was the smallest plan. Even if you lived off campus, if you had your own kitchen, you had to buy it. So I have a value category, the four categories: presentation and appearance, taste, texture, and value. And I thought there is no way in the world that this plate of onion rings is worth $17 because all I got that day for lunch was just onion rings. I think I gave it like a 0.5 or a 1 because theoretically I could have eaten as many onion rings as I wanted for $17.
Right.
They're terrible. I think I remember that was my biggest one. I think that the combination of like a local feature that people could connect to start it off before it grew into other stuff was big.
That's true. Yeah, anything local. If you had like, I don't know, do you trust like Yelp or I guess it's not for restaurants like TripAdvisor, any kind of things like that, where it's just any person with an experience reviewing something and then the aggregate to it. I think a lot of people have problems with like a Yelp review because they're getting like the worst experience or the absolute best experience. But if you're just going in with categories like value, remind me again, was it texture or
Yeah, value, texture, taste,
texture
and presentation and appearance, how it looks and how
with
it's rated.
with like a kind of objective, a certain set of different buckets that you're ranking on? It feels more objective. It feels more legitimate. And then you add in that local angle, and it's like people could trust that. There's kind of a trust factor into a local thing, whereas with a Yelp or a TripAdvisor or just any kind of Google review, it seems like people are just angry or had a uniquely amazing time with something.
I think that tends to be the case. And I actually started after I made the blog putting all the reviews on Google Maps as well. So I can't speak to Yelp or TripAdvisor. I don't really use those. Google Maps, I think, tends to have that outlier experience, which is part of why I do it, because I think that it stands out in a sense. Like most people who do a Google review of a restaurant wouldn't write, I don't know, 12 paragraphs. Like I've hit the word count on Google Maps many times. I've had to edit and delete reviews to actually get it to post. So I think it stands out in that sense, and that there is clearly a significant amount of time and attention paid to it. And I think having the explanation helps. In general, the platforms, it does defer to extremes. Someone forgets you order 1 star. You have a non-discerning palate, which I think a lot of people do not have a discerning palate. 5 stars, they cook my French fries good, or whatever.
Right.
So I don't think it's as strong as a signal as the blog itself is, but I like putting it on there. And I also like doing that because I don't know if you saw, I got in an altercation with a restaurant on Mackinac Island based on a Google Maps review recently.
I did not.
Altercation might not be the right word. So my wife and I had our first anniversary trip up on Mackinac Island in August, and I made it deliberately, try to hit as many places as possible. If you don't know, it's a small little island up
Yeah.
in northern Michigan between the straits. It's all touristy, no cars, only horses and bikes. It's a fun place. But I've like plotted out in advance. I will go to as many onion ring restaurants as I can. And my wife was very patient because it was an anniversary, and she still let me do it. But I posted them all, and it's a very tourism-centric island. So I think restaurants pay attention to the Google reviews. And one of them They were bad. They were terrible. It was probably the first time that I did not finish them. I could not finish them. I literally threw them away because they were so flavorless and bland. The place called Cannonball Inn and Catering, and Google Maps has the feature where like the owner of the restaurant can reply to you, and they replied to me by saying, "Sorry you didn't enjoy. After reading your novel, I have come to the conclusion that you need psychiatric help. Enjoy your time on the island." So stuff like that. I kind of like doing that because it's an opportunity to reach more people, and also fun little things like that.
That's just a horrible business move, though. To
It's so bad. Why would you
Yeah.
insult your customers? And
Yeah.
everyone can see that. It's public. Why would you ever do that?
Right.
It's stupid. But yeah, stuff like that. That's why I like Google Maps, because I think there's a bigger platform and more interactivity, but their critiques you raised are totally valid.
Yeah, definitely. It's less of an outlier experience. And then what you're doing that's cool is you're putting paragraphs of thought and then different categories into something where you'll never see a Yelp review that says, "I had a decent time. The value was okay. Like the taste was
Yeah.
like no one reviews their average or above average experience, but you're putting the thought into that. And for the example that you just outlined on the Google Maps thing, it's not just a dumb business experience, like business decision, like you said, for not just for you, but for the fact that everyone can see that example. But if somebody were to click on your review, I would think they would see the kind of thought that you put into it, the kind of energy and the kind of the diversity of categories that you considered for something. It gives a full picture of the experience. And I think that's really cool. The fact that you've kept this going for so long now, it just shows a lot of thought that goes into it. And I think speaks to your credibility on the issue that you've done it for so long now.
I think at this point, I've said this in other places, I think I might be the world's expert in onion rings at this point, only because I can't think of anyone else who is dedicated.
Right.
So, sort of by default, like there's no one else to challenge my claim.
Yeah.
It's fun.
You
it's expertise.
Found a kind of a niche like that. But how did you keep it going? Because I think a lot of people have a creative thought like this. I've started so many different blogs years ago, like when I was in college, high school, like, oh, this is a neat idea. And then 3 months later, it gets lost in the shuffle of school, work, whatever. How did you find the time to keep something going that's kind of niche, and that your friends initially said when you started it that I'm not going to read that?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not always been perfectly consistent. There's been gaps of like 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, but I always come back to it. And it just depends. I mean, the most recent occasion was restaurants were all closed for the past several months, and I could not go anywhere or get any food to review. Just other reasons, writer's block or something. But in terms of keeping it going, I mean, it seems silly, but it's kind of part of my like online identity. Like it's a brand in a sense. It's a silly one, and it's not like a significant portion of my life or anything, but it is. I think it's part of what I present myself as and part of what I do. I think at the core, it's a passion. I think you can't keep doing something if you don't have a passion for it in perpetuity. It's not a slog for me. It's a pleasure. So even if I take gaps, it's still something that I want to do. It's something I want to continue doing, even if there's times where I'm not doing it perfectly. So, I mean, it's been next month, it will be 4 years that I've been doing it. I'll probably do some anniversary special or something. But in that time, it hasn't been that big. I think I've done 60 reviews in 4 years, which is okay, but it's not huge. It's not a ton.
Sure. Yeah. But I mean, still 4 years is impressive that you're still trucking along with it. 60 is not a ton, but like, I think most people on an idea like that might give up at a certain point just because, oh, it's fun at the start, and then kind of get lost within other things. But what's even if it's not been a ton of reviews, what's the growth been like? Have you had people reach out to you, that strangers reach out to you, people comment on different blogs, different reviews?
Yeah, I've had a lot of it. I think it was primarily driven from my own social media channels, so it tended to be people I knew. But I have gotten comments of people just like, if my Facebook messages were turned on, someone would say, "Did you write this review on Google Maps?" I got that a couple times. So Google Maps really got a lot of new things coming in from that. The Google local guides team themselves reached out to me a couple of times because they noticed this pattern of reviews. So I did a photo shoot with them. I did an interview with them. I did like a consulting thing with them. That's probably the biggest thing that blew me away because it does not. I didn't think anything I do would be on the radar of Google, especially something
Right.
that I don't think is that significant. But that's probably the biggest surprise. Actually, let me. I don't know if you can show. It might be copyrighted. I'll put a background of
Sure.
one of the photo shoots they did. It's just me holding onion rings. I almost put it as my background for this. I already have it teed up. One sec. So they took this
Oh
picture
my God, that's
of
amazing.
me just holding the onion rings. It's a restaurant called Graydon's Crossing here in Grand Rapids. I just took that was my lunch break that day. Like I left work to go do that instead. And little things like that. So Google is probably the biggest. I never ever would have anticipated this to ever happen kind of thing. But yeah, occasional other things as well.
First of all, those onion rings are huge, or is it just not? Is this
Oh no, they're very big. They are
okay?
significant. I forget they call them as colossal. They had like cilantro in them. They were kind of like a Mexicanish onion
Oh,
ring. It was good.
okay.
They're good rings.
Well, so like that's something you didn't see popping up, and I know you're following this just because it's a passion and it's fun. But do you have any, whether it's short-term, long-term goals, or something you want to see this turn into?
In the long term, I want to move it off of Blogspot, which it's okay. It's not a good platform. I want to have like a real website, like a more professional one, such as this could be professional, and just kind of do it consistently. I'd like to have a following for this. The reason I don't is that I haven't really ground at it. It wasn't intentional. It's been more of a hobby and a passion project. So in the long term, yeah, I'd like to expose this to a wider audience than it currently is, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a good standard to keep saying I'm just going to follow my passion and then like see where it ends up. Like maybe it turns into a bigger thing, maybe it doesn't. I want to do some rapid fire questions with you,
Sure.
and we can jump into more of the details too. But just a few questions about places you reviewed. Do you remember the highest overall score, like the best onion rings you ever had?
I do. 19.5 out of 20, Uchiko, Austin, Texas.
And what were so great about those?
They had an unbelievable flavor. They were tempura battered onion rings. They were massive, and the little pockets of flavor within the tempura battering were things I've never ever had. There was like roe in there. There were this whole Japanese blend of seasonings. It was incredible, and they didn't even cost that much. It was $5 for four, and for the quality of the onion rings, that is insanely good value. And yeah, they kind of blew me away. Like I visited my brother who used to live in Austin, and like that was a main point of the trip was going to get those onion rings. Yeah, blew me away. I still remember how they taste.
Is there any, on that note, is there anything in particular that, whether it's within the texture or within the flavor, that if an onion ring does have, it's going to blow you away more than anything else?
I think novelty gets me more than anything else because I've kind of seen the most of what it does now. When you actually have seasoning in the batter, whether it's like spices or something, I think that's really good. A lot of people are pretty bland with it. They'll just maybe put some salt, maybe some pepper. So if you put something in the batter or the breading that's more flavorful, that kind of gets me. Also, the onions got to be cooked well. There's like a delicate balance. Like if you cook it too much, it becomes mushy and it kind of slides out. I call that slippage. If it's not cooked enough, it doesn't have any flavor. So well cooked onions and well flavored batter are kind of the two key bits to flavor.
Sure. Now, worst onion ring experience, was it the one you mentioned before, the one on the way to Mackinac?
That is the worst experience. I'd have to double check to see if it was the worst score. Bottom three was one of those ones on Mackinac, Cannonball Inn. There was another one on Mackinac. This is a bit of a tangent. So one of the restaurants explicitly said they were frozen onion rings and where the frozen onion rings were from, Brew City. So I could find like the ingredient list of the onion rings and how much they cost. So I knew how much of a terrible bland ripoff that it actually was. And then I went to another restaurant immediately after that who served the same frozen onion rings, except they cost more. They had less quantity, and they were way worse prepared. So I think that was a great Total Brewery, also on Mackinac. That made me angry. Like I was fuming as I was sitting there typing. It's just like I was disgusted by the idea that it existed. And then another one, Fifth Third Ballpark, where the Whitecaps play in Grand Rapids. Complete garbage. It tasted like sand.
Sure.
Like it was just, you don't expect ballpark food to be very good, I guess, but it was disgusting. So bottom three are probably those. They stick out the most in my mind as me being angry that they existed.
Gotcha. Yeah, ballpark food's kind of, I wasn't going to say hit or miss, but usually just miss.
Mm.
What about best fast food onion rings?
I was just talking about this. Arby's has pretty good, although I think they're discontinued now. I couldn't find them
Are
on the
they?
review. They're not
Okay.
online. I think some locations might still have them. So Arby's did have good onion rings. Uh, Culver's actually, I think, has really good onion rings for the quality that they do because they do their thing fresh, kind of. Other fast food, Burger King is not good. I don't like Burger King. It's more like reconstituted onion paste that is shaped into a circle. Like there's not a piece of onion in those things. That's soft and mushy and kind of nasty. Where else? Yeah, Culver's and Arby's probably the top two that I've
Yeah.
been.
I would say Arby's probably. Arby's is a really strong side game in general. The mozzarella
Mm.
sticks, their fries are good. Burger King, I've had this theory. I can't remember if I told you this before, but I had this theory years ago that they made their fries intentionally bad because they changed their fries at one point, maybe like 20
Mhm.
years ago. It made them bad so that people would upgrade to onion rings. Because I always, anytime I would go to Burger King, obviously McDonald's always had better fries, Wendy's had better fries. So I had this conspiracy theory that they made their fries even worse, and then people can upgrade to onion rings. So every time I'm there, don't go there very often, but I'll be like, I'm just gonna get onion rings because this is something they have that like McDonald's doesn't have. But again, they're not very good
They're better than the
either.
fries. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, the fries are terrible. What about do you dip? Do you have like a favorite dipping sauce, or do you just eat them plain?
I always have a dipping sauce if they come with it. I never add to it myself. Although I hate ketchup, I won't eat ketchup. Sometimes they come
Same.
with ketchup. So
I hate ketchup.
I cannot, even for this, I cannot bring myself to eat ketchup. A house-made ranch is pretty good. There's like variations you can do on ranch, like I don't know what it's actually called, but like orange ranch, where they put some kind of blend of seasonings to change the color of the ranch. That's kind of ubiquitous. Southwestern or zesty or there's some horseradish or cayenne or something in there. Two places I'm actually kind of blew my mind. Non-standard. One was a cinnamon chipotle dip,
Hmm.
what weirdly worked really, really well with onion rings. Another one was habanero honey barbecue sauce, which also very good. But in general, you're going to get standard ranch or the standard orange ranch, whatever you want to call that. Like that's what Burger King says with theirs, like little zesty Southwestern packets. But ranch is the most common. If it's a good ranch, I think it's good. My whole thing with sauces is that there's two ways a sauce can be functioning. Either you think a sauce is good because it masks the bland flavor of the ring, and the rings are just a delivery vehicle for the sauce, or they complement the flavor of the onion ring, which I think is a lot harder to pull off. So most of the time sauces are but occasionally they can really elevate it to the next level.
Sure. Yeah, I was gonna say, do you review them without the sauce taken into consideration?
It's a component of it. Although with ketchup, obviously I don't because I don't eat it. But I always eat the onion ring first without sauce and then with sauce. So I got to get it with and without.
Because that's how, like, if I'm having pizza, to know how truly great the pizza is, I think you have to have like a cheese or one topping pizza to apples compare it to something else.
Yeah.
Like you can't add too many variables to it because if you're just using it for sauce, you might as well just use breading with no onion in it. Really, like.
I think a lot of times that's functionally what it is. It's just
Right.
greasy carbs to shove in your mouth while you're drinking.
Right. Last quick question on the top of my head was, have you ever tried to make them yourself?
I did. So back when lockdown was hitting and I couldn't go to any restaurants, I did a live show on Facebook where I just said, okay, I'll make onion rings. They were terrible. It was a disaster. So I kind of know like the gist of how to make a good onion ring, but I do not personally know how to make a good onion ring. I think my oil wasn't hot enough. I didn't do a good fry time. They were just garbage, like among the worst that I've ever had. But I didn't have a restaurant, so I didn't rank them per se, but it was not good. They were too greasy. They were not consistently coated. Like everything that is wrong with an onion ring was wrong with those onion rings. So in theory, I think if I actually like made a good faith effort, I could make some good ones, but that was not the context to make a good one.
Well, that should probably make you appreciate the really good ones even more than what's
It does.
fun
And it, like I kind of anticipated getting some flack for it because I'll say I kind of trashed onion rings, but I'm not selling these onion rings. It's not my job to produce and sell onion rings that are good to eat, even though I know how to eat them. Which kind of like, I don't know why people hate critics, I think, because if you can't make a movie or write a book, you're just saying, this is bad, I don't like it. What do you really know if you don't have the skills to back it up? So maybe the whole blog is flawed. I don't know.
Well, I think it's something you wouldn't think to really make at home. I know people have before, but like my girlfriend and I did a sushi making class before the pandemic, and it was fun and it turned out okay. I mean, it was kind of messy and it wasn't like up to par of what you get in a restaurant. But when everything was considered of, you had to buy the chef there was telling us what to do if you wanted to make it from home, was buy the paper, buy the rice, buy the salmon. All those things put together would have cost more than getting sushi in a restaurant. Then the effort that went into it took a lot of time, and it was a mess. And it's like, why would I ever do this? It's kind of the same thing with onion rings of why would I make them from home when if I know a spot that's local that really kills the game, I'm just gonna go pick them up. It seems like it'd be a lot of work.
Yeah.
One more thing that I just remembered when we were talking about restaurants. Do you have anything on your bucket list for onion rings?
Not really. I mean, I get a lot of suggestions from people for my job before. In the before times, my job used to require some frequent travel. So I always like solicit opinions when I go to a new city for something. Like Louisiana had some good stuff when I went to New Orleans, Colorado Springs when I visited my wife when we were dating, DC because I work for a place in DC, so I commute there and back. But no bucket list per se, but things that people recommend to me, I always want to check out when I can.
Sure. What's the perfect? I know you said the novelty really will blow you away, but if you could describe like the perfect onion ring, a 20 out of 20, if a 20 out of 20 exists, I know like figure skating, you can't have a perfect score. Um,
I think it does. I haven't found it yet because even Uchiko had a little bit of flaw in the execution. The onions were just a little too greasy and then kind of slid out of the breading. So I can say the characteristics that make up a good onion ring, and I think that there's ways you can execute that to make it perfect. So first of all, it has to be like consistently coated, not patchy at all, which is hard to do when you're hand breading something, hand frying something. So that's harder to do. And then value. I mean, onion rings can be a ripoff. There's full stop. It's onion and like batter. It's not expensive. And obviously all restaurants operate on a margin, so you're always paying more than like the base of it. But onion rings in particular can be a complete and absolute ripoff, like those places on Mackinac I was talking about, where it was just no way in hell are frozen onion rings worth that much money. But beyond that, I think thick cut onion rings, so like tall and thick and battered, are almost always better than breaded, but not exclusively. So a batter, whether beer or otherwise, it's like a wet coating rather than a dry coating. Thick cut onion rings because you need the onion flavor. Thin cut, they can like dissolve into onion mush and juices instead of actually being an onion bite. And then a good fry time. I think that's kind of the biggest variable is how long you fry it or how well you fry it. Because there's like a perfect timing to get the onions cooked well, to get the batter crispy, but not and be flavorful, but not let it collapse on itself. Slippage or shedding is the alternative slippage where you like bite at the onion and the batter chips off and the onion stays in place. It's rare, but I've had it a few times. So it's really about making it well and making it flavorful. And most people don't do either.
Yeah, I think the onion slipping out is the most common thing I've seen, at least when you just bite into it and it falls out. And
It's a
that's
scourge.
definitely right. The picture that you showed in your background, those giant ones, would you consider that novelty, or is that just?
See, it's not novelty surprises me. It's not that that's always good, but like I've probably had 30 onion rings that were exactly the same because they're all frozen from some distributor. So when something does something different, I take note of it, but different is not always good. Those ones, novelty played a bit to it. They were massive. Like they were almost spheres. Like they were insane. The cilantro was nice, and I think they had some kind of Mexican-ish inspired sauce to go with it. So yeah, that was novelty. There's a place in DC, well, Arlington technically, called Mexicali Blues, which is an El Salvadoran / Mexican restaurant, and they had like French fried chiles in with the batter, which was incredible. Like I've never had that with the onion. Stuff like that. Like I think that there's ingenuity. I reward ingenuity, I guess. I reward things that are different and surprise me. But that's not always.
Was that the example you just provided? Is that the biggest surprise that you had, or is there anything weirder?
That's up there. I mean, the dipping sauces I mentioned on Mackinac were the most recent ones that kind of were really weird. I mean, I'll glance through all my reviews quick because I can kind of say at a glance. flavor. The tempura stuff at Uchiko was kind of. I've never had any other
Sure.
tempura powdered onion rings. That was pretty good.
That sounds great too.
Went to a place in Colorado Springs. I think it's a chain. It's a Brazilian grill, Tucanos. They had a sweet onion straw, which was like coconut and mango-y onions all in like little pieces rather than rings. That was pretty good. I mean, most of what you get is kind of bread and butter. Well, here's an example of one that was a innovation that wasn't good. Hut's Hamburgers, Austin, Texas, came very, very highly recommended. Everyone was raving about it. Basically, their big shtick is that they have uncracked peppercorns in the breading. But basically, that means that the pepper flavor doesn't go in the breading. So it was cool, but it did not taste good at all. It didn't have any flavor to it. Bloomin' onion, I guess that's an innovation.
Oh,
Not
sure,
great.
yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest. I'm not very impressed by the bloomin' onion.
No, it's average.
It's like a thing. Yeah, scrolling through, nothing else really stands out to me. But unique flavors, unique preparation.
Sure.
That's kind of what hits me.
Yeah, the tempura ones, and obviously because you gave it 19 and a half out of 20, sound like the most interesting.
They are legitimately worth a trip. If you are in Austin, I would like take specific time to go there. They're that good.
Sure, that's high praise. Where can people find all the reviews, and then, or if they want to recommend something, the website address?
Sure. Website address is solacepa, SOLACEPA.blogspot.com. It's also on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So Solacepa on any of those. Not if I mentioned it. That does mean onion alone in Latin.
Right.
I'm pretty proud of that name, to be honest. But yeah, updates are whenever I do. I'm sitting on one right now for a pizzeria. It's not good. Spoilers.
And was that in Michigan?
Yeah, in Michigan, in a little vacation area. This is where the standard might break down, because they had incredible pizza, but the onion rings were hot garbage. So
I was going to say, how often does that standard break down?
So I'll be the first to admit its flaws. I mean, it's a sample size of one thing, one time. It could come down to the day, how overstaffed they were, how busy they were, how they prepared it. I think it's most apparent like when you look at fast food. I went to one location of a fast food franchise that has like thousands of places in the country. That's not indicative of like the best quality per se. They are standardized, but it could be luck of the draw, a bad employee. Like sample size of one is always going to be imperfect and not great. I think it doesn't hold up when people don't specialize in it, when it's an afterthought. Like
Sure.
you're at a deli that serves it as an afterthought, or in this case, a pizzeria that just has it because they have onion rings. So I don't think it's foolproof, but I think it's generally in the right direction. And I would say a pizzeria that takes time to make good onion rings would be better than one that doesn't on that.
Right. Is there any correlation if it's considered a side versus an app, if it's better or worse?
I've thought a lot about that. I think apps tend to be better because sides can be more of an afterthought. Like if it is available as an appetizer and not a side, or vice versa, like if it's a side with no appetizer, it's probably going to be worse, like almost invariably.
I think
Because
so.
if it was good, they'd serve it independently. So I'd have to actually look at the data to be perfectly sure. But generally speaking, I think appetizers would be better.
I would think so too. Yeah, that'd be an interesting right up there though, appetizer versus side. Because I would assume an app, when they put thought into it as like one thing that you're going to be having.
Yeah. That could
Sides
be
are
an
just kind of
article,
throwaway.
a new essay, if you will.
There you go. All right, solacepa.blogspot.com, and then on across other social media channels.
I don't think you'll find anything else if you Google Solacepa, so it'll show up there.
That's true. Tyler, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.